The moment my husband calmly slid his coffee mug across the kitchen counter and told me to pack my bags before dinner, something inside me broke so completely that it made me strangely calm. After 18 years of marriage, after every sacrifice, every dream I buried so he could build his own, he expected me to disappear before the sun went down as if I had never existed. What he didn't know was that while he believed he was ending my life, I had already prepared something that would change both of our futures forever. Before that dinner was served, I would quietly place a sealed envelope beside his plate, and everything he thought he controlled would vanish in a single heartbeat. If you believe kindness is stronger than cruelty, forgiveness is more powerful than revenge, and hope can still bloom after heartbreak, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share this story with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel to become part of our growing family. Your support allows us to continue sharing emotional stories that remind us all that even the darkest moments can lead to brighter tomorrows. Clara Whitmore had never imagined that her marriage would end with such ordinary words spoken on such an ordinary afternoon. The sunlight poured through the kitchen windows of their beautiful suburban home just outside Portland, making everything appear peaceful. Fresh flowers stood in a vase near the sink, birds hopped across the backyard fence, and the smell of homemade bread filled the air. Nothing about the day suggested that it would become the most unforgettable day of her life. For years, Clara believed she had built a marriage based on loyalty. She had met Grant Whitmore when they were both in their 20s. Back then, Grant had nothing except impossible dreams and endless determination. Clara worked 2 jobs while he finished graduate school. She delayed buying new clothes so they could afford his textbooks. She sold the engagement ring her grandmother had left her so Grant could invest in his first business. She never complained because she believed that marriage meant building a future together. Eventually Grant's company succeeded beyond anyone's expectations. Their small apartment became a large home. Their second-hand sedan became luxury vehicles parked neatly in the driveway. Vacations became more expensive. Business dinners became more frequent. Yet somewhere between success and comfort, the gentle young man Clara had married quietly disappeared. Success changed Grant slowly enough that Clara hardly noticed at first. He became impatient whenever she asked simple questions. He criticized the meals she prepared even though she had cooked his favorites for years. He began correcting her in front of guests, treating her opinions as if they belonged to a child rather than the woman who had stood beside him through every struggle. Friends noticed the changes long before Clara admitted them to herself. Whenever neighbors praised Grant's achievements, they also smiled warmly at Clara, saying she must be proud. Grant would laugh and respond that business was a lonely road and that nobody really understood the sacrifices he had made. Those words stung because Clara knew exactly whose sacrifices had been forgotten. She never demanded recognition. She only wanted respect. As months passed, Grant spent more time traveling for work. His phone remained locked. Meetings seemed endless. Weekend conferences became routine. Clara tried convincing herself that successful people simply worked harder. She trusted him because trust had always been the foundation of their marriage. Then little things started adding up. Expensive restaurant charges appeared on their shared account on days Grant claimed he had skipped lunch. A boutique receipt arrived in the mail for clothing Clara had never seen. A hotel reservation existed only 30 minutes away from their own home. Each discovery hurt, yet none alone proved anything. She kept hoping there would be a reasonable explanation. Instead, she received silence. One bright Saturday afternoon, Clara attended a charity fundraiser where Grant had promised to meet her. She waited nearly an hour before realizing he wasn't coming. While leaving the venue, she noticed Grant across the street laughing with an elegant woman around his own age. The woman adjusted his tie with an intimacy that no stranger would ever dare. Grant looked happier than Clara had seen him in years. Clara stood frozen behind the glass entrance doors. She wasn't angry. She wasn't jealous. She simply realized that the smile she had spent years trying to bring back now belonged to someone else. Grant never saw her. She quietly drove home. That evening he claimed his meeting had run late. Clara simply nodded. She had stopped asking questions. Instead of confronting him immediately, Clara began observing quietly. She discovered unfamiliar perfume lingering inside his car. She found hidden credit card statements. She noticed that every business trip conveniently matched weekends when that same elegant woman posted photographs from nearby cities on social media. The woman's name was Vanessa Collins. She worked as a marketing consultant. She frequently appeared beside executives during corporate events. Grant insisted she was only a colleague. Clara pretended to believe him. Not because she was weak. Because she needed certainty before making decisions that could never be undone. Meanwhile, Clara quietly rebuilt pieces of herself that she had abandoned over nearly 2 decades. Before marriage, she had studied interior design. She possessed remarkable artistic talent but had placed her dreams aside to support Grant's ambitions. One afternoon, she wandered into a local design studio simply to admire furniture displays. The owner, a cheerful older gentleman named Russell Mercer, noticed her eye for detail. He asked for her opinion about a showroom arrangement. Clara hesitated before offering a few suggestions. Russell immediately rearranged the room exactly as she recommended. Customers walking through the showroom stopped to compliment the new display. Russell smiled. He asked Clara if she had ever considered returning to design professionally. She laughed nervously. She told him she had been away from the field for nearly 20 years. Russell answered with words she would never forget. Talent doesn't disappear simply because life becomes busy. Those words stayed with Clara. Within weeks, she began helping at the studio part-time during the day while Grant believed she was volunteering at community events. For the first time in years, she felt useful beyond maintaining someone else's life. She rediscovered confidence hidden beneath years of quiet disappointment. Customers loved her ideas. Design magazines featured one of the studio's renovated spaces. Russell encouraged her to build a portfolio. Clara finally remembered who she had once dreamed of becoming. Meanwhile, Grant hardly noticed. He remained consumed by expanding his company. Whenever Clara mentioned new projects or exciting opportunities, Grant barely looked up from his phone. His answers became automatic. "That's nice. We'll talk later. I'm busy." Later never came. One afternoon, Clara accidentally overheard Grant speaking on the patio while believing she was inside. He laughed softly before saying that he couldn't wait until everything was finalized. He promised that soon there would be no more complications. Clara understood exactly what he meant. She quietly walked away before hearing anything more. That evening, she met with a family attorney recommended by Russell's wife. Not because she wanted revenge. Because she wanted clarity. The attorney carefully reviewed years of financial records. He discovered something shocking. Although Grant publicly claimed every success belonged solely to him, Clara legally owned nearly half of everything because of investments made during the early years of marriage. Even more surprising, several important company shares had originally been purchased using money from Clara's inheritance before Grant's business ever became profitable. Grant had forgotten one very important detail. The woman he considered powerless had helped build the empire he believed belonged only to him. The attorney encouraged Clara not to act emotionally. Instead, he advised patience. Gather every document. Protect every asset. Remain calm. Clara followed every instruction carefully. She copied records. Organized financial files. Collected bank statements. Documented property ownership. Everything happened quietly during ordinary afternoons while Grant remained occupied with meetings. Weeks later, the attorney prepared divorce documents. He placed the thick envelope in front of Clara. Her hands trembled. Not because she feared losing Grant. Because she finally accepted that the marriage she loved had already ended long ago. The papers simply acknowledged what her heart had refused to admit. She placed the envelope inside a leather folder and locked it inside her desk. Days passed. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Grant entered the kitchen unusually early. His expensive suit looked freshly pressed. He carried himself with absolute confidence. Without greeting Clara, he poured coffee, checked several messages, and finally looked toward her with an expression colder than she had ever seen. His voice remained calm, almost rehearsed. He told her to pack her bags before dinner because he wanted her gone by the evening. He explained that he had arranged everything. He said their marriage had run its course. He insisted there was no reason to make the separation difficult. He even offered to let her keep one of the cars, speaking as though generosity could erase years of betrayal. Clara stared at him quietly. For a long moment she said nothing. Grant mistook her silence for defeat. He believed she was too shocked to respond. Instead, Clara slowly smiled for the first time in months. Not a smile of happiness. A smile born from peace. She thanked him for making the decision easier than she had expected. Grant looked confused. Clara calmly excused herself, walked upstairs in the bright afternoon sunlight, opened her desk drawer, and removed the leather folder that had been waiting patiently for exactly this moment. She looked out the bedroom window toward the blooming garden she had planted years earlier. The flowers continued opening beneath the warm afternoon sun, completely unaware that one family was about to change forever. Holding the divorce papers gently against her chest, Clara realized something remarkable. She wasn't carrying the weight of an ending. She was carrying the first page of a brand new beginning. Clara carried the leather folder downstairs with steady hands while the late afternoon sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors. Every room in the house held memories that once made her smile. The hallway still displayed photographs from family vacations, charity events, and anniversaries that had looked perfect from the outside. Looking at them now, she realized that pictures only captured smiles. They never captured loneliness. She placed the folder inside a kitchen drawer and quietly continued preparing dinner exactly as she had planned that morning. Fresh rosemary seasoned the roasted chicken, vegetables simmered gently on the stove, and homemade rolls cooled on the counter. Anyone walking into the kitchen would have believed a loving wife was preparing a special family meal. In truth, Clara was preparing the final chapter of a marriage she had spent nearly 2 decades trying to save. For the first time in years, she didn't feel anxious about Grant's opinion. She wasn't wondering whether he would criticize the food or ignore her efforts. His approval no longer mattered. That realization brought a peace she hadn't experienced in a very long time. Grant spent the afternoon in his home office making phone calls. His voice carried through the partially open door. He sounded unusually cheerful, speaking about exciting changes, fresh beginnings, and a future that seemed to have no place for Clara. Every laugh echoed through the house like another reminder that he had already moved on emotionally long before he admitted it. Clara didn't cry. She simply folded clean kitchen towels, arranged dinner plates, and reminded herself that heartbreak didn't always sound like screaming. Sometimes it sounded like someone laughing in another room while your entire world quietly fell apart. Around 4 o'clock, Clara's closest friend, Meredith Sloan, stopped by to return a serving dish she had borrowed after a neighborhood fundraiser. Meredith immediately noticed something different. Clara's face looked calm, almost peaceful, but her eyes carried the weight of someone who had finally accepted a painful truth. Meredith gently asked whether everything was all right. Clara invited her inside. Without exaggerating or speaking bitterly, she explained everything that had happened over the past several months. She described the distance, the lies, the hidden expenses, the forgotten anniversaries, and finally Grant's afternoon demand that she leave before dinner. Meredith covered her mouth in disbelief. She had watched Clara support Grant through every difficult season. She remembered Clara working double shifts while Grant finished school. She remembered Clara organizing community fundraisers that introduced Grant to influential investors. She remembered Clara celebrating every achievement as though it belonged equally to both of them. Meredith quietly asked what Clara intended to do. Instead of answering immediately, Clara opened the kitchen drawer and showed her the divorce papers. Meredith looked at her friend with tears in her eyes. She expected anger. She expected revenge. Instead, she saw dignity. Clara explained that she wasn't trying to destroy Grant. She simply refused to allow him to erase her. Those words stayed with Meredith long after she left. By early evening, sunlight still filled the dining room. Clara carefully arranged the table using the wedding china that had remained untouched for years. Crystal glasses sparkled beside polished silverware. Fresh flowers decorated the center of the table. Everything looked beautiful. Ironically, it was the most elegant dinner Clara had prepared in months. Grant finally came downstairs wearing another tailored jacket. He glanced around the room with mild surprise. He complimented the meal without much emotion, assuming Clara had accepted defeat. He interpreted her calmness as surrender. He couldn't have been more mistaken. As he reached for his napkin, Clara quietly placed the leather folder beside his dinner plate. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. She simply laid it there with the same care she had used while setting every other place at the table. Grant looked confused. He opened the folder casually. His expression changed almost immediately. The confidence disappeared first. Then the color drained from his face. His eyes moved rapidly across the first page. Divorce petition. Property distribution. Financial disclosure. Legal representation. Each document seemed heavier than the last. He looked up at Clara, unable to understand what he was seeing. He had expected tears. Instead, he found preparation. He had expected pleading. Instead, he found certainty. For several moments, neither of them moved. Outside, children laughed while riding bicycles down the quiet street. Birds continued singing from nearby trees. The ordinary afternoon carried on as though nothing extraordinary had happened inside the Whitmore home. Grant slowly turned more pages. His breathing became noticeably heavier. The documents listed company shares, investment accounts, property ownership, retirement funds, business equity. Every detail had already been professionally organized. Everything had been verified. Nothing had been overlooked. For the first time since Clara had known him, Grant looked genuinely frightened. He realized she hadn't acted emotionally. She had acted intelligently. The balance of power he believed belonged entirely to him had shifted without him noticing. Grant finally asked when she had done all of this. Clara answered calmly that she had started preparing the day she realized honesty had left their marriage. Grant insisted things had moved too fast. Clara silently remembered the countless lonely afternoons, forgotten birthdays, broken promises, canceled vacations, and unanswered questions that had led to this moment. Nothing about today had happened quickly. It had taken years. Grant tried another approach. He claimed they could still work things out. Only hours earlier, he had demanded that she leave before dinner. Now he suddenly wanted another chance. Clara recognized the difference. He wasn't afraid of losing his marriage. He was afraid of losing control. Grant stood and paced around the dining room. His confidence continued fading with every step. He admitted that he had grown close to someone else. He insisted it hadn't meant anything serious. He claimed he had become confused after years of focusing on business. He blamed stress, success, pressure, long hours. Anything except his own choices. Clara listened quietly. Excuses no longer carried any weight. Eventually Grant asked the question that revealed what truly mattered to him. He wanted to know exactly how much she was entitled to receive. Not how badly she had been hurt. Not whether she had suffered. Only the financial consequences concerned him. Clara answered honestly. She told him the attorney had simply followed the law. Nothing more. Nothing less. Grant suddenly rushed upstairs. Moments later drawers opened and closed loudly throughout the house. Cabinets slammed. Office doors banged shut. He searched desperately through filing cabinets, trying to prove Clara's paperwork was somehow incomplete. Instead, he discovered empty folders. The important documents had already been copied months earlier. Everything he thought he controlled had quietly slipped beyond his reach. When he returned downstairs, he looked exhausted. For the first time, Clara noticed something she had never seen before. Grant looked small. Not physically. Emotionally. His arrogance had depended upon believing Clara would never leave. The certainty that had fueled his behavior had completely disappeared. Days passed after that unforgettable dinner. Grant moved into a furnished corporate apartment while legal proceedings officially began. Word spread through their social circle surprisingly fast. Some people immediately assumed Clara had been abandoned. Others quietly believed the rumors that Grant had started a new relationship. But the truth slowly emerged as financial records and legal filings became impossible to ignore. People learned who had invested the original startup money. They discovered whose inheritance had saved the business during its first difficult year. Former business partners privately admitted that Clara had introduced Grant to several investors who later transformed his career. Suddenly, people began seeing Clara differently. Not as the successful businessman's wife. As the woman who had helped create that success. Meanwhile, Clara devoted her energy to Russell's design studio. Her confidence blossomed. Clients specifically requested her. She redesigned family homes, community libraries, and local cafes. One project was featured in a regional lifestyle magazine. Then another. Soon she was receiving invitations to speak at small design workshops during the daytime, encouraging women who believed they were too old to begin again. Every audience left inspired by her honesty. She never spoke bitterly about Grant. She spoke about rediscovering herself. Her story reached people because it wasn't built upon revenge. It was built upon resilience. One sunny afternoon, several months later, Clara attended the grand opening of a renovated historical building that her team had transformed into a beautiful community arts center. The mayor praised the designers publicly. Local newspapers photographed the event. Families filled the courtyard. Music played softly beneath clear blue skies. As Clara greeted visitors, she noticed a familiar figure standing quietly near the entrance. Grant. He looked different. The expensive confidence had faded. His shoulders slumped slightly. His face carried deep exhaustion. He waited patiently until the crowd became smaller. When Clara finally approached him, she noticed something unexpected. Regret. Not dramatic regret. Quiet regret. The kind that grows slowly after someone finally understands the value of what they threw away. He held a folded newspaper featuring Clara's latest design project on the front page. He admitted that he had been reading about her success. He confessed that watching her rebuild her life forced him to recognize how selfish he had become. He explained that the relationship he believed would make him happier had ended almost as quickly as it had begun. The excitement had faded. Reality remained. For the first time in years, Grant accepted responsibility without blaming anyone else. Clara listened with compassion. But compassion was no longer the same as surrender. She had learned that forgiveness and reconciliation were two completely different things. Grant finally asked whether she believed they could ever repair what had been broken. Clara looked toward families laughing together in the sunshine. Children chased bubbles across the grass. Artists displayed colorful paintings. Neighbors greeted one another warmly. Life had continued moving forward. So had she. Without anger in her heart, Clara gave him an answer that neither of them could have imagined on the afternoon he told her to pack her bags. Clara looked toward the families filling the courtyard before turning back to Grant. The warm afternoon breeze carried the sound of children laughing, musicians playing soft acoustic melodies, and neighbors congratulating one another on the beautiful restoration of the old building. It was the kind of peaceful day she used to dream about during the lonely afternoons when she wondered whether happiness would ever find her again. She smiled gently, not because the pain had disappeared, but because she had finally made peace with it. She realized that some questions deserved honest answers instead of comforting ones. Grant waited quietly. For perhaps the first time in their entire marriage, he wasn't trying to persuade her, interrupt her, or defend himself. He simply waited. Clara finally admitted that she had forgiven him. Not because he deserved forgiveness. Because she deserved freedom. Holding on to resentment had once felt like carrying a heavy suitcase everywhere she went. The day she chose to forgive him was the day she finally put that suitcase down. Grant lowered his head. He understood immediately that forgiveness wasn't the answer he had hoped for. Forgiveness did not mean another chance. Forgiveness did not erase broken trust. Forgiveness simply meant Clara had refused to let bitterness control the rest of her life. As they stood beneath the bright afternoon sun, Grant quietly confessed something that had haunted him for months. After Clara served him the divorce papers, he expected everyone to admire him and support his decision. Instead, people began asking uncomfortable questions. Longtime friends stopped inviting him to gatherings. Business associates who had known Clara for years treated him differently after learning how much she had sacrificed to build his success. His own employees surprised him the most. Several senior staff members privately admitted that they respected Clara more than anyone else because she had always remembered birthdays, encouraged struggling families, donated anonymously to employees facing medical emergencies, and volunteered at community events without seeking recognition. Many of those generous acts had happened while Grant was traveling for business. He hadn't even known. Grant confessed that success had slowly convinced him he was the most important person in every room. Only after losing everything that truly mattered did he realize that kindness had built a stronger reputation than wealth ever could. Clara listened without satisfaction. She had once imagined this moment many times. She thought seeing Grant regret his choices would heal her. It didn't. Because healing had already happened long before he arrived. His regret belonged to him. Her peace belonged to her. The divorce proceedings continued over the following months. Thanks to careful preparation and honest legal representation, everything remained surprisingly respectful. There were no ugly public arguments. No dramatic courtroom confrontations. No attempts to embarrass one another. The judge even commented that despite the sadness surrounding the case, both parties had behaved with uncommon dignity. Clara walked out of the courthouse feeling lighter than she had in years. Not because her marriage had ended. Because uncertainty had ended. She no longer had to wonder whether tomorrow would bring another lie, another disappointment, or another lonely evening waiting beside a cold dinner. Life became beautifully ordinary. She bought a modest cottage with large windows overlooking a small botanical garden. Every room reflected her own design style instead of someone else's preferences. Soft natural colors filled the walls. Shelves overflowed with books she had always wanted to read. Fresh flowers appeared in every room simply because they made her smile. She planted lavender along the front walkway. Neighbors often stopped to compliment the garden. Children walking home from school waved whenever they passed. For the first time in many years, the house truly felt like home. Russell eventually announced his retirement. To Clara's complete surprise, he offered to sell the design studio to her under generous terms, explaining that no one else cared for the business with as much heart. She accepted with tears in her eyes. The little studio that had once given her a second chance now became hers. She renamed it simply Whitmore Design Studio, keeping her last name not because of Grant, but because it had become part of her own identity after so many years. She refused to let painful memories steal even her own name. The studio flourished. Young designers joined her team. Experienced architects sought her opinion. Community organizations requested her help restoring historical buildings and family centers. Instead of measuring success by income, Clara measured it by impact. She quietly started a scholarship for women returning to careers after years of caring for their families. Many applicants shared stories that sounded painfully familiar. Dreams postponed. Talents forgotten. Confidence buried beneath responsibility. Clara personally read every application. She remembered exactly how those women felt. One afternoon, nearly 2 years after the divorce became final, Clara received an invitation to speak at a regional leadership conference. Hundreds of people filled the auditorium. Entrepreneurs. Teachers. Artists. Parents. Students. The organizers introduced Clara as a business owner whose journey had inspired thousands through resilience, integrity, and compassion. Standing beneath the bright stage lights, Clara looked across the audience. She could have spoken about betrayal. She could have spoken about divorce. She could have spoken about losing everything. Instead, she chose a different message. She spoke about self-worth. She explained that many people spend years trying to earn love from someone who has already stopped appreciating it. She reminded the audience that kindness should never require sacrificing dignity. She encouraged everyone to invest in themselves just as faithfully as they invest in others. Near the end of her speech, the audience rose together in a standing ovation that seemed to last forever. Among the hundreds of faces, Clara noticed one familiar figure standing quietly near the back. Grant. He wasn't sitting in the reserved section. He hadn't asked to meet her afterward. He simply applauded like everyone else before quietly leaving through a side exit. That single gesture told Clara everything. He no longer wanted to reclaim the life he had lost. He simply wanted to honor the woman he had once failed to appreciate. Several weeks later, Clara received a handwritten letter in the mail. The envelope contained no request. No excuses. No attempts to reopen old wounds. Grant simply thanked her. He thanked her for believing in him when no one else had. He apologized for confusing success with importance. He admitted that losing her had forced him to become a better man than wealth ever had. At the end of the letter, he wrote that he hoped one day someone would love her with the same loyalty she had always given so freely. Clara folded the letter carefully. She smiled. Then she placed it inside a memory box alongside old photographs, vacation postcards, and tiny keepsakes from a chapter of life that had shaped her without defining her. She didn't keep the letter because she wanted to go back. She kept it because healing deserved to be remembered too. Years later, visitors walking through Whitmore Design Studio often noticed a simple framed quote hanging near the entrance. It wasn't signed. There was no explanation beneath it. It simply read, "The people who truly love you will never ask you to become smaller so they can feel bigger." Every person who paused to read those words carried them home. Some smiled. Some quietly wiped away tears. Some gathered the courage to change their own lives. Clara often watched them leave through the glass doors, hoping that perhaps one small sentence might become someone else's beginning. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to leave a meaningful comment and tell us this. Do you believe forgiveness always requires giving someone a second chance, or can forgiveness simply mean choosing peace and moving forward? We'd love to read your thoughts and learn from your experiences. And if this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. As Clara locked the studio at the end of another beautiful afternoon, golden sunlight stretched across the quiet street. She looked at the thriving business she had built, the neighbors who greeted her with genuine affection, and the life she once believed she had lost forever. She smiled, knowing one simple truth. The day her husband told her to pack her bags wasn't the day her life fell apart. It was the day her real life finally began.